Recently, I voted in 2 elections. The first entailed a needlessly complicated online system just to check a box on a screen, because I live in the UK but I'm also a French citizen, which means I needed to vote online. And the second entailed me rocking up to my local polling station just to place a cross on a little sheet of paper. And even though I voted in 2 different elections in the span of 3 days, which in itself is kind of a crazy coincidence, I came out of both feeling quite anticlimactic. Was checking a box on a screen or putting a little cross in a piece of paper really it? For the next 2 to 4 years? Was the culmination of all of my thoughts, opinions, actions, beliefs really just summarised in one tick, one cross? I left the polling station feeling kind of depressed. After all, the remainder of all of the decisions that were going to affect my life for the next 4 years were now in the hands of whatever government was going to be elected to power. Or were they? At the moment, if you realise there's something wrong with society, whether that's socially, environmentally, or climate related, there's only really a few different ways you can actually directly get involved with fixing the issue. 1. Participate in liberal democracy once every few years by voting for parties who pledge to deal with that issue and hope that they actually do so. 2. Donate either money or volunteering time to a non-profit who say they are dealing with that cause. 3. Invest in or create for-profit solutions to that problem. And 4. Undertake small individual actions that you think will help solve said problem. Let's say, for example, that you're an individual like me who's recently noticed the decline in butterfly numbers over the last few years. In the UK especially, I've particularly noticed a decline in flying insects this summer. Maybe it's been the particularly cold and rainy summer we've had, but I don't think I've even seen like one single butterfly this whole summer, which is really alarming. Anyway, let's say that I've noticed this phenomenon, and I've done a bit of research and understand the causes behind the decline of butterflies, which in this case is increased pesticide use from intensive agriculture, climate change, and habitat loss, and want to try and do something about it. What are my options? 1. Well, I can vote for pro-environmental parties in the next election. The only problem is none of them seem to particularly talk about butterflies. Of course, with hundreds of thousands of issues, butterflies just don't quite make the cut into the pledges on their manifestos. But still, I can make an educated guess that those with better climate, environmental or agricultural pledges on their manifesto will either directly or indirectly help butterflies. So I can put my little cross in that box once every few years to vote for that party, and then that's it? I mean, maybe I could get further involved in more local levels of liberal democracy. In the UK, that would be like my local parish or town council, and sink a lot of my free time arguing against a hierarchical and bureaucratic structure just to plant a few little flowers in the local park in my town. But on a grand scale, that's just not going to cut it, and besides, I don't really have the time or energy to argue against the same 3 old conservative men who have been on that council since they retired. 2. I could donate to butterfly charities or volunteer my time with them. Okay, so I donate a bit of money to the butterfly charity, which makes me feel better for a while, or maybe I volunteer like an hour a week to help that charity with habitat management or some online tasks they allocate for me to do. But I still don't really see a marked difference around me. I don't really know where my money's going towards. I don't really know if the hour I'm volunteering a week for brush cutting is actually helping the butterflies without damaging other parts of the ecosystem that I'm less aware of, or if it's even helping at all and not just a busy task the charity appoints to volunteers because they've got too many eager volunteers to deal with. Side note here, obviously butterfly charities are probably one of the most harmless charities in existence, so me volunteering my time with them or donating to them is probably only going to cause a net neutral or even better, a net positive effect. But for a lot of other causes, the non-profit industrial complex is a real thing, and a lot of big charities can actually cause quite a lot of harm. I've already covered the WWF scandals in a previous video, linked above somewhere, and it's not just ecology and conservation where charities might end up perpetuating the same problems they're trying to address in the first place. Whether it's taking donations from exploitative funding sources, or forcing help onto people who don't really want it, there's quite a lot of things that can be said against big charities across the world. In addition, charities are often at the whims of larger funding bodies and thus prioritise the needs of those funding bodies rather than the needs of the people they serve. Charities are often a bandage on a bullet wound type of situation, fixing the symptoms but not the cause, which is most often rooted in hierarchy and capitalism. On top of that, the existence of large-scale hierarchical charities often further detaches people from being able to help themselves. by making them reliant on the help handed out by charities and making them feel more and more disempowered. Anyway, coming back to British butterflies, obviously a lot of these issues are kind of moot points here, but if I was volunteering for a butterfly charity, there'd still be a certain level of detachment I could face, such as not really feel like I'm fixing the root causes of the issues that are leading to the butterfly's decline in the first place, or feeling like I'm only really helping like one specific species rather than a wider scale, whole nature ecosystem restoration. 3. So moving on from non-profits, I could also invest my money in a for-profit that is claiming to help butterflies. Perhaps in a new AI technology which claims to better track butterflies for research. The bonus? Well, if it succeeds, I'll grow my own finances, which is great. But damn, turns out that company is also going to be selling data on other things they track with that AI, and use of it for conservation is gatekept because the price of buying the service is so high, because obviously that company's main goal is to produce a profit. Oh, and to put a cherry on the cake, they've just received a large investment source from a dubious pesticide company who want to use the AI to write a research paper on why their pesticide is damaging butterflies less than we thought, actually. Oh well, I guess I can try and find a more ethical company to invest in next time. 4. Well, seeing as how I've exhausted all other options, I guess I could try and bring back the butterflies myself. I'm lucky enough to have a little garden in the house I rent, so maybe I could ask my landowner not to mow and plant some butterfly-attracting plant species in the garden. And maybe hope that one day next year the butterflies will come back because I'll have created a little bit of new habitat for them. And that's it. That's all I can do. Okay, well, I might as well give up. Not just on butterflies, but on all of the interlinked social and ecological issues that are plaguing our planet. Well, bye. I'm joking, of course. There is a number 5, a 5th secret option. Have you noticed something missing in all the previous options? One word. Community. There's no mention of it. But community is a solution in and of itself. And more than that, community organised in a way that a utopia could be organised, a utopia where butterflies are once again abundant, for example, is an action that we can start right here, right now. And that leads us to our 5th option, prefiguration. Before I explain to you what prefiguration is, there's something I want to ask you. When queuing for a bus or a train, do you wait in line for your turn to get on? Are you a member of a sports club or a hobby club, like a book club for example, where there isn't a boss, and all of your members make a decision based on consensus as to when you should next meet up or when the next practice should be held? And if you have children, do you tell them to share, to work together, to cooperate? Well, if you've answered yes to any of the above, then you're an anarchist. Or so David Graeber says. He was an anarchist theorist that wrote a lot about prefiguration, and to be honest though, I've barely dipped my toes into his large body of work. There is one of his quotations that particularly sticks out to me. As much as possible, one must, oneself, in one's relations with one's friends and allies, embody the society one wishes to create. But what does that actually mean? Well, it means if you want a peaceful world where everyone cooperates and shares, then you need to do the same and you need to advise your children to do the same too. If you want a world where people patiently wait their turn and don't fight, then you need to wait patiently for the bus. And if you want a world where there are no mean bosses and your views are as valued as the next person's, whether in a book club setting or otherwise, then you need to build and take part in those horizontally organised structures yourself. And that last one there is the key. Because in essence, that's what prefiguration is. Communities organising themselves in the ways in which they would want to be organised. Prefiguration is individuals and communities creating their desired futures right now. Prefiguration is us literally being the change we want to see, embodying the society we wish to create and see thrive. And prefiguration is building the new world out of the shell of the old. And while it might start with your local horizontally organised book club agreeing when to meet up next, or you cat-sitting for your neighbour knowing that one day they'll cat-sit for you too, or even just you and your friends getting together and cooking a communal meal, it doesn't have to stop there, it can go further than that. Let's go back to butterflies, because after all, my channel is rooted in ecology, and I'm sure you're all here to listen to me talk about nature, not just boring politics. So butterflies are declining, and we've exhausted all of our options through voting, donating and volunteering time with a charity, investing in relevant for-profits, and planting butterfly-attracting species in the garden. What's next? Where does prefiguration fit into all of this? Well, it could look like you banding together with other interested community members to start a guerrilla gardening scheme across your community, where you start to plant butterfly-attracting wildflower species in your communal spaces. Perhaps you could also knock on the doors of the residents of your communities and try and persuade them to also plant butterfly-attracting wildflower species in their own gardens to start to create a network of microhabitats across your community. Perhaps you could set up discussions with local farmers to explore other pesticides they could use or other ways of farming that wouldn't harm butterflies as much. Or perhaps your community could all get together and start a communal butterfly breeding scheme. And then through this breeding scheme, you can start to reintroduce endangered native species back into your community. And when your community action starts to lead to butterfly numbers increasing again, you could start to network with other interested members of other communities and show them what worked and what didn't. And on until grassroots communities across the UK are also undertaking positive butterfly action. Because prefiguration doesn't have to be at just a small scale. As long as it's from the ground up and organised horizontally, action can be scaled up indefinitely. Obviously with areas like ecology, large-scale, joined-up thinking is super important to, for example, reconnect habitats or create green corridors between different wild spaces. But this too doesn't need to be undertaken by private landowners or a top-down charity. For example, a community-led, grassroots, horizontally organised group could come to a consensus that the UK needs to have at least 5% more wildflower meadows before butterflies can really start to bounce back. They could then appoint a temporary delegate to relay this information to a UK-wide butterfly committee, who could then coordinate the conservation of butterflies and the improvement of wildflower meadows across the country. Note though that each delegate in the committee would only be temporarily appointed by their own communities for that particular discussion and would only relay the decision their communities had made about that particular decision. They would be retractable at any time by their community, and thus the scaled-up butterfly action would still be driven by a grassroots, bottoms-up, horizontally organised approach. And it's not just butterflies that can be helped with prefiguration. Many social, climate and ecological issues could be worked on. So much so that through prefiguration we could really start to build a better world. A solarpunk world. To build a solarpunk world, we need more than just butterflies. We need to start replacing existing systems and structures with a society where people are in control of their own futures. We need to build systems of direct democracy, where anyone can get involved with making decisions about their own lives and their own communities. We need to build systems of mutual aid, where resources and services are exchanged voluntarily and collaboratively for common benefit. And we need to build free association into our groups and relationships, where individuals can associate voluntarily without hierarchies or the state or private property dictating how they can do so. Okay, so that's a bit of a word salad. What does all of this actually mean for real life, and how do we get there? Well, surprisingly, here in the UK, we already have so many groups that are prefiguring society and are on their way to building a better world. I'll go through a few. Repair cafes and repair workshops, where people bring in their clothes and tech and items to be mended voluntarily by the community. Workers' cooperatives, where there are no hierarchies or bosses, and each worker owns parts of the business and has equal decision-making power. Community-supported agriculture schemes, where food is grown locally by the community for the community. And community larders, where this food is redistributed for free to the community itself. Libraries of things, where items people don't really need to use more than a few times a year can be loaned out. For example, lawnmowers and drills, to reduce resource use and consumption. Community land trusts, where local land is looked after by the community for the community in whichever way they need. And grassroots rewilding network, where people are banding together to restore lost species or reconnect habitats. And that's just the UK. There are so many initiatives, small and large, which are undertaking prefiguration across the world. Whether that's through community-formed defence militias and de-escalation trainings, mutual aid programmes, health cooperatives, transport cooperatives, housing cooperatives, community juries or citizen assemblies, open-source digital platforms, and even more. There are just so many ways people can organise prefiguratively, and I can't even name them all in this video. Now, in my opinion, prefiguration is solarpunk, and solarpunk is prefiguration, because solarpunk is more than just an aesthetic. It's hope. Hope for a better world. A world which we can start building right here, right now. And in the process, we will start to make our world more aesthetic too. More diverse, more in harmony with nature. More built for our own needs and desires rather than for the whims of profit. Wouldn't that just be amazing? So what do you think about prefiguration? Do you have any examples of solarpunk or prefigurative groups in your community or area? Let me know in the comments down below. See you in the next one. Bye!